Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Thanks for tuning in. Today I want to talk about ways that we can improve as landscape photographers without leaving our homes. If you're an avid watcher of YouTube, then you've probably seen tons of videos of landscape photographers being out in the field in amazing locations at amazing times of day during the best seasons, capturing amazing photos. But there are certain times in our lives when that isn't necessarily possible. But does that mean that we stop developing as photographers? Are we only developing our skills in landscape photography by being out in the field? Well, that's what we're going to cover in today's video, and I'm going to tell you a bit of a story of something that happened to me last year and earlier this year that put me in a situation where I couldn't really go out with the camera. So I want to start just by thanking everybody who watches this channel. I like to try and keep things as real as possible, and I want this channel to obviously be about the photography, but I also want to be able to share my own personal experiences, hoping that those experiences maybe resonate with some of you guys. And I think that perspective is sometimes beneficial when you're trying to pursue creative endeavors. Now, the thing that happened to me last year was I got sick. I haven't really shared this in any great detail on social media, and I'm not going to go too deep into it today, but at the end of last year, around November, I contracted an illness which basically meant that I had to be off my feet for most of the day. And for somebody like me who really enjoys being out and about, I live quite an active lifestyle, and with all of this kind of happening during the winter months, which are typically very dreary and miserable at the best of times, it kind of left me feeling a little bit lost for a good number of months whilst I was recovering. And this is something that a lot of people may resonate with. You know, not everybody has the ability to go out all of the time. Sometimes life gets in the way, and if you struggle from any chronic illnesses, or if you have any debilitating conditions that maybe prevent you from going out all the time to participate in landscape photography, then I hope this video will give you some perspective and maybe a sort of a fresh view of things, of ways that you can continue to develop your skills. And this is an approach that I took when I was ill at the start of this year. Now, my personality type is that of somebody who always kind of needs to feel like they're moving forward, no matter how quickly or sort of profoundly that is happening. And when you get ill and when you get sort of struck down in your prime, so to speak, that can sometimes be a bit of a mental struggle, because it can easily feel like you're sort of stagnating in your creativity or in your passion or your skill set or whatever it is that you're trying to pursue. And in this example, we're talking about landscape photography. Because I wasn't able to go out as often as I could, and when I was going out, I was only going, down the road. It was going out for sort of like 20 minutes, 30 minutes at a time, and that made it very difficult to be immersed in the landscape. And I was going to the same places time and time again, which on the one hand is great because you get to know these places, but on the other side of the coin, it's difficult because you feel like you're not going to many exciting locations and you're not getting that variety that I think a lot of people enjoy, the excitement and the buzz of finding new locations and finding new subjects to photograph. But I was determined not to beat myself up too much about this, because as with everything in life, things pass, nothing ever stays the same. And thankfully my condition and the illness that I had, it had a bit of a definitive endpoint to a certain extent. This wasn't something that I was going to necessarily have to live with for the rest of my life, which I'm very, very grateful for. And I know that that's not necessarily the case with everybody. But even during that time, sometimes it does feel like it's never ending. It was about 6 months before I started to feel normal again. And that is a considerable amount of time. And when you're just starting into that, into that time scale, into that journey, the end can feel very much out of sight. So what I started to do was just find ways to benefit my landscape photography without going out in the field. And obviously from a technical standpoint of using the camera, there's not really an awful lot of landscape photography that can be done indoors, but you can still certainly get to know your camera just by taking photos around the house. That does help you being out in the field if you're comfortable with how to use your ISO, how to shoot in manual, how to manipulate aperture, getting to know your lenses, where is the sharpest aperture on all the lenses that you have. Those sorts of things can all be done at home. But the thing that I really found beneficial, and the one thing that I want to share with you today, is how we can go back and revisit our old photos and learn an absolute ton from doing that process. Now, I think we all have a tendency, myself included, when I go out to locations, and in the past when I've visited new places and I've come home and I've edited those photos, and those may be photos that have ended up in my portfolio, but then by the time you've moved on to the next location, that last shoot is sometimes in the back of your mind. And how often do you go back to visit and revisit old photos? Let me know down in the comments. But for me, it's not something that I did an awful lot. And if I ever did revisit photos, it was more the photos that were in the more short term, sort of maybe in the last couple of months. I certainly wasn't going back to last year or the year before, or looking back 5 years into Lightroom catalogs at some of my earlier shots, because, well, I think as we progress as photographers and as we get better, we quickly just want to disregard the stuff that we did a couple of years ago, because in our minds we think, well, I'm a better photographer now than I was back then, so there's no merit in the photos that I took way back in the day. But I think that mindset is slightly wrong. I absolutely love editing photos. I love being out in the field and capturing compositions in camera, but I find so much joy in editing the photos in my style, manipulating tone curves, adjusting the colors to the color palette that I really love. There are definitely things that you can improve on from an editing standpoint, regardless of whether the photo was taken last week or last year. As you'll know if you've ever been hunting for compositions when out in the field, there are a million compositions within a single frame that you could have potentially chosen. And I think that's where this skill set becomes beneficial, because you can still learn about composition without being out in the field. The best way to do this is to revisit these old photos of maybe larger landscape shots, maybe a seascape or maybe the vista from the top of a mountain. And what I would do, and what I ended up doing, is looking at those images and trying to recompose them and objectively look back and see if there's ways that you can improve the composition, the crop, the framing of those images. When we are out in the field and we are up against it with the light, or we're running out of time, it's easy to feel rushed, and you take an image and you may be perfectly happy with that image. But once you've sat with it for a while, and certainly once you've revisited it, you might look at that in a slightly fresher perspective, and you may see things that you missed when you were initially taking that photo. As we improve as photographers over the years, our sensibility and our eye for composition gets better as well. So when you're looking back at photos that you took 2 years ago, you're a better photographer now than you were when you took that photo. So you can then look at that frame and you can see things that you wouldn't have seen 2 years ago. And that just means that you can then approach that particular edit with a very fresh set of eyes. Now, I also like to approach these edits in an editing way. So I'm not just looking at composition, but I'm sometimes going to be looking at just re-editing the photos. Now, I'm sure a lot of you guys can relate to this, but as my journey into landscape photography and my journey into photography as a whole developed, my editing style, or the types of editing styles that I enjoyed, have changed drastically over the years. The things that I loved in images 2 years ago are very different to the things that I look for in an edited image these days. 2 years ago, I was really into a heavier contrast, a moodier photo, whereas in the last 6 months, in the last year, my photos are now a lot lower contrast. Everything is a bit more muted and softer, and that progression just means that there are potentially hundreds of photos that you would have taken 2, 3, 4 years ago that you can then revisit and re-edit in your new editing style that works for you. I think the reason that I disregarded a lot of images that I took years ago is because I don't like the editing style that I used on those images, so therefore I don't see them as potentially being valuable photos now, but it's being able to see past the edit. What I now do is I look back at images that I just objectively think that composition was something that was quite nice, the light was quite nice, but I'm not mad for the edit, so I'm going to re-edit that image. And that is something that you can do at any time of day. If you can't get out with your camera, then just re-editing these images may result in a photo that you're now really happy with, and you might add that into your portfolio, or you might share that online and get some really positive feedback. Now, another thing about me is that I am kind of like a sickeningly positive person. I always like to try and find the positive in situations. I'm not necessarily one for sort of wallowing in self-pity, so to speak. And especially when you are, confronted with these moments in life where, you are feeling sort of struck down creatively, whether that's through illness or through, family commitments or jobs. All of these things prevent us from being able to do photography in the way that we would like to. But there's always a silver lining, and there's always ways that we can develop our skill sets. And it's just a way of adapting, both from a mindset standpoint and from a practice standpoint. That idea of adaptability is, I think, something that will put you in good stead moving forward in your journey as a photographer. So I hope this video has given you a little bit of a motivational boost to go back at least and have a look at your old photos and see, with your fresher, more experienced viewpoint, if there's any way that you can develop or re-edit or recompose those images in a way that makes them new images for you. And for anybody who is struggling out there, whether you're struggling with health or whether you're just struggling to get out with the camera, hopefully this is at least a way that you can sort of ride out that storm until you can at least get back out there and start taking photos again. So thank you so much for watching this video. Apologies that it hasn't been one that's been out in the field. I am actually down in Pembrokeshire at the moment when this video is going live. I'm on holiday with my girlfriend Alex for her birthday, so this is a bit of a rush to get this video out, but I still wanted to give you guys something to look at this week and at least share some ideas that I think could be beneficial to you. So if you've enjoyed the video and you find these tips useful, do make sure to give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, consider hitting that subscribe button and ring the bell to get notified when new videos go live, which is every Thursday around 5 p.m. As always, guys, thank you so much for the support. I hope you're all having a great week, and I will see you all next week for another video.